I'm Aurelio Castro from the leadership team, bisexual activist and researcher from Italy. Really proud to be the host of this panel session about the future of bisexuality, identity, and politics. So today we have very special people here. I'm going just to do a brief presentation. So as you of course have followed our previous bi-icon panel, we have Hafsa Qureshi from Stonewall, UK, and activist, bisexual, genderqueer, Muslim, disabled Indian, as well as she works in the UK promoting awareness about the intersection of experiences of bi+ people and LGBTQIA+ in general. Then we have Christian Kless, professor of sociology and researcher on consensual and non-monogamous intimacies within the Department of Manchester, also UK. We've done a lot of research into LGBTQIA+ intimacies and is an expert on non-monogamies and bisexualities. And we also have Shiri Eisner, bisexual Mizrahi activist. They wrote a fundamental book for bisexuals and bi+ people all over the world called Keynote for a Bisexual Revolution, in which they deconstruct all the stereotypes attached to bisexuality and provide great analysis of bisexual politics, history of research, and actually what can we do as bi+ to radicalize our politics and our activism. And together with me, we have the two members of the leadership team, Ellen Davenport, researcher on parenthood and bi+ parents from also UK, like so many people here, and trying to break the curve together with dear friend Lucia Tralli, a researcher from Italy, also like me, and she works on bi+ media representation, trying to analyze how we are represented in different kinds of media. So this is going to be a chat and a discussion about different issues and our experiences and lives, what has happened in the last years for bisexual people and bi+ identities, and also what is going to happen in the future. Feel free to ask any kind of question you want in the comments. The chat is available. Please keep your microphone muted as speakers, but feel free, of course, to intervene when some other speakers actually is waiting or trying, if you want to make a point. So we'll try to keep the flow a bit fluid. And my first questions for all of you is actually about how we can, and we are bi+ people, and what kind of bisexual, pansexual, queer, polysexual people we can be in LG spaces, LGBTQIA spaces, and what kind of people others expect us to be. So we have the idea that bi+ people can be in the movement, but cannot actually, or do not have to speak or ask for any demands, which is have the idea that our issues are the same of monosexual, gay, and lesbian people, and that we just have to run along with it. And that kind of ways frames us as being the good bisexuals, being the bisexual who don't raise our voice, who don't ask for anything because we already have everything we could be. Of course, that is an issue that leads to many questions, which a lot of you have worked not only on bisexual and bi+ identities, but different ones. So I want to ask you, and whoever wants to start, please feel free. So why being good bisexual won't bring queer and bi+ liberation and revolution? Do I have to pick? Shiri, would you like to do the honors and start?
I actually missed some of the question because my internet was giving me problems. That's why I was waiting for someone else to answer.
Okay, no worries. Do someone else wants to write in, or I can start?
I can go, but I feel like I'm just gonna quote Shiri because, like, I'm trying not to fanboy too much, but like, yeah, that your book is excellent. Anyway, so the idea of like being a good bisexual, why it won't help, I think, comes down to what Audre Lorde said: the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. No matter what we do, we're still working within a cis-normative, heteronormative society. And although I might sound like a hypocrite because a lot of what I do is like corporate LGBTQ plus inclusion. The structures that have been created are not there to serve us. They were created by cis people, they were created by monosexual people, they were created by heterosexual people. And if we keep trying to work ourselves within those structures, we're never going to work to destroy them. We're never going to work to restructure them, because we're going to keep perpetuating the same things, perpetuating the same kind of heteronormative expectations. Like sometimes when we hear in bi discourse or wider LGBTQ plus discourses, you know, we're not greedy, we're not this, we're not that. And my counterpoint is, well, I'm polyamorous, and I do like certain, sorry, I don't want to get too graphic, but we're often told to be less than, we're told to diminish aspects of ourselves in order to fit into these societies. We're not supposed to talk about sex. We're not allowed to talk about sex work. We're not supposed to talk about things that are deemed to be on the fringes of society, because it's not acceptable. And all we want to do is be accepted, don't we? And, you know, frankly, we can definitely do more than that. We can go beyond that. I think we should demand a lot more than just, yes, we're here. I think we've reached that point where, you know, we have a lot more to say.
Yeah, I think in many ways, fundamentally, society's expectation of us is to not exist at all. So, you know, even when we are tolerated, and I'm using this word very intentionally, we are asked to minimize our presence, our bisexuality, our voices. And as much as we are present, we're asked to perform normativity, and we're asked to perform respect with the rules, because that's how it works. Like, oppression wants us to be silent. The only way fundamentally to be a good bisexual is like to minimize ourselves to an extent that we disappear.
Yeah, if I can come in there, I very much agree with what Shiri and Hafsa were saying. And, you know, thinking about what it means to be a good bisexual who fits, you know, I find myself thinking a good bisexual could be potentially a nominal bisexual, a person who uses the identity label bisexual, but does not necessarily sort of, you know, evoke in their presence, for example, in a political group or in a cultural context, anything which, you know, sort of upsets and disturbs a kind of mononormative setting. So, you know, historically speaking, a lot of people who have worked on the history of bisexual movement, for example, have highlighted that, you know, bisexual people have always been part in gay liberation politics, for example, in the 60s and 70s, and they may have been cherished, you know, comrades in struggle, as long as they would not disclose their bisexuality, or as long as they would not bring, you know, another gender partner, for example, in a, you know, sort of homosexual same-sex type of environment. So it's kind of quite interesting. There's something about bisexual desire, bisexual intimacies, which tends to decenter taken for granted knowledges in certain political frameworks. And I think, yeah, trying to fit in, I agree with Shiri, undermines, you know, to a certain extent, the scope of being a kind of, yeah, you know, a rich experience of being a bisexual person. But also being a good bisexual always creates, you know, the idea of the nasty ones, the kinky ones, you know, the over-sexualized ones, who, you know, yeah, the bad ones, who are then excluded.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, so it's very good to set the picture of who is the good bisexual. And I agree with Shiri when they said maybe the good bisexual is the bisexual that should not and doesn't have to exist. So that's why they erase us. I mean, because we don't have to, unless it's for fetishizing us. or at least for fantasies, I guess, and that also deeply involves non-binary bi-plus people and women who are bisexual and pansexual. They who face certain and a huge part of the fetishization of bisexual identities. I think bisexual men face different kinds, and not necessarily, probably less, and I think it's less, but just in a more more kind of the attraction to the bisexual who can conquer anyone, which is kind of different as a power structure compared to the bisexual women who should, in the hegemonic view, be serve and excite everyone else. So I guess this is also some kind of power structure. And do you, Ellen or Lucia, do you have any mind on any situation like what is like a good and how can we not be good bisexuals, even for parents or in the media?
I don't really have too much to add, but just to echo what everyone has said is that our acceptance as bisexual individuals shouldn't depend upon us being monogamous or us not fitting into stereotypes, regardless of which stereotypes we meet or don't meet. I think we obviously deserve respect as bisexual individuals, and that respect and that acceptance shouldn't depend on us doing all this extra work to combat stereotypes. We might meet those stereotypes and we still deserve respect as bisexual individuals.
And I think the whole discourse around stereotypes is also very distracting. Like when we put our entire focus and attention into stereotypes, first of all, we are not saying anything about ourselves. We're talking about what other people think about us, which centers non-bi people. And it also silences discussion about like the real issues, like whatever is killing us. We are disproportionately mentally ill and in poor health, living in poverty, exposed to violence and sexual violence, and you know, a multitude of other topics which we don't get to speak about and work on when we focus on the stereotypes and on this like respectability trajectory. Accepted is not the point. The point is we are oppressed and we need liberation.
Yeah,
I find,
oops,
oh, sorry.
sorry. No, it was
You go.
to add just one segment, like going along with the media representation of bi people, which is what I'm working on, and it is exactly like that. So everything is about stereotypes and who fits better into the good bisexual stereotype, and ultimately it's a losing fight because there is no way to get good representation if we just care, I mean, to not be the bisexual vampire or the bisexual killer, and ultimately who cares? I mean, and so yeah, I was just completely agreeing with you, Shiri, that there is no way we can win this fight by just focusing on what we are not, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think also it's more than who cares. Like when we're villainized in the media, I think that's a really, really good pointer for the things that society fears that it connects with bisexuality. So like when you see us as killers and as vampires and as, you know, whatever else, what this exposes is the things that society thinks bisexuality can undo. And I think that just like testifies to the power, subversive power that we have, like the things we can do with bisexuality that we can leverage in order to change things.
Definitely. So the point is, and I agree with you all, like, oh, please, Christian, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly take up the second point Shiri raised earlier on, which I also like very much, and which I like about Shiri's book as well, is kind of foregrounding, these other political issues, which, tend to surface in many bisexual people's experience, questions of poverty, issues of, mental health, which invites us to think about, sexuality and bisexuality in a wider context. So in that sense, I think also, maybe to rephrase the question, I think, advancing the bisexual revolution ultimately is not enough. So in that sense, I think, if we identify as bisexual, I think it is, good to bring ourselves and our power, our imagination, our wishes, our fantasies, our desires, to a struggle. But ultimately, I think, it needs to go beyond the bisexual thing. So in that sense, I think being a good bisexual is not enough, because a lot of other issues we have to care about.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I talk about a bisexual revolution, I don't just mean by specific struggle. I do mean the fact of like our ability to use bisexuality and all its meanings and all of the ways that it threatens society in order to subvert all oppressive structures, which for me, absolutely, it's patriarchy, it's heterosexism, it's capitalism, it's colonialism, it's government. I'm an anarchist. Like it's all the structures that control our lives as bi people, but not just as that.
Agreed.
And it's not just about us either.
Mm-hmm.
It's, our position as bi people, like the identity of bisexual, the whole point is not choosing a side. The whole point is being able to identify and be in solidarity with everyone. That is one of my favorite meanings of bisexuality. It means that when I am working on undoing like our oppression as bisexuals, I'm also undoing other people's. And it's like the famous saying, like, no one is free until everyone is free. And the sense of connection and solidarity is absolutely part of how I think about bi politics and bi struggle.
Thank you, Shiri. Amazing. And yeah, definitely, because we are all interconnected and we cannot just focus. No one here and no one will be just have one identity, and we cannot just selectively choose, okay, I will take this perspective and ignore anything else that I am and that other people around me are. And also that puts us also some responsibility that came up in a panel before, like now the discourses on bisexualities are mostly focused on the Western world, and there's the idea we can over-determinate and over-discuss things from just a specific point of view and not understand it, not just cross-culturally, but interculturally interconnectedness. So I guess it's just, we cannot frame or talk about singles. There's no single issues. There definitely is no single issues on that point.
Yeah, it's like Audre Lorde said, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, that is a lot. So on that point, following this line of thought, like we don't want to be, and we want to be bi plus people, and not just bi plus people. We want to feel free to build intimate connection with all the people that we care in our lives, with our communities, with the people we love, care, whatever meaning of love we can build within our relationships and the idea of relationship. And since we're talking about dismantling structure and the patriarchy and everything, I think we could also take the point of non-monogamous identities, relationship, and how the interconnection with bi plus identities helps to dismantle all this hegemonic structure. What can we do? What has been done? Who wants to go?
I don't know about things that are being done. I can speak about meanings, which is, bisexuality is always intermingled with polyamory in terms of its meanings. Like when you come out as bisexual, or even just reading about it, it always comes together with a question of polyamory. You're always presumed to be polyamorous. And I think that's a lot of what these identities share. The more than one, which is, you know, another form of, how should I say this? I think Western structures and patriarchal colonial structures very much rely on oneness. Like you're supposed to be one gender, you're supposed to be attracted to one gender, you're supposed to be attracted to one partner and only be with them. It's a really like masculine centered idea in that patriarchy relies on it very much, like the one, the great, the eternal, the unchanging. And I think bisexuality and polyamory have like a lot of potential together to subvert a lot of these structures that like monogamy, which has been historically and in many ways currently a way to control women and keep them bound to a single man, to benefit from their labor, their emotional labor, their bodies, their existence. Monogamy is also very much tied to capitalism, property inheritance. It's also how, in many ways, capitalism keeps us isolated. The only person close to us is supposed to be our one partner. And that is like a lot of power that bisexuality can draw on because of that connection, because of that intermingling.
Yes, thank you. So monogamy, mononormativity, and compulsive monogamy also an integral and constitutive parts of hegemonic regimes. So there's this, of course, sexual and gender binary that systems are entitled to maintain, and they think they're entitled to everything. So let's see how it goes. Go, Christian, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think, particular ways of being, let's say, particular ways of practicing consensual non-monogamy may open up avenues to critically interrogate, patriarchal gender identities, patriarchal forms of masculinity, for example. It may also open up avenues to kind of, put into question the way how gender binaries work as a foundational tool of constructing intimacy and sexuality. At the same time, I always feel that consensual non-monogamy too is always drawn into that kind of predicament of patriarchal relationships. So I don't think that necessarily by being non-monogamous we do anything, about challenging patriarchy. I think something else needs to happen. And to a certain extent, I think also certain forms of consensual non-monogamy, even consensual non-monogamy, not only non-consensual non-monogamies, are also drawn into, let's say, neoliberal logics of, capitalism and sort of, share a kind of colonial logic of a racialized love and intimacy and sexuality narrative and so on. So yeah, so I think as a movement, we need to ask questions that go beyond that kind of, let's say, let's advocate consensual non-monogamy.
Yeah, absolutely. This is part of why I think non-monogamy without feminism is just an extended form of patriarchy. it's just another form for men to accumulate access to women. I think polyamory has the potential, like anything really, like bisexuality too, existing in a certain identity isn't inherently political. The question is what you do with it, your political practices and your practices in life, what you advocate for, what you talk about, the way you construct your life and the meanings that you give your experiences are what makes a thing. So yeah, I don't think polyamory is automatically feminist or subversive of everything. I mean, it's certainly subversive on its own of monogamy, but that in itself doesn't really have value, anti-oppressive value. Like, we need to be active about it.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said of just, I mean, going against the grain for the sake of it without using any of that power and the privilege that you hold won't necessarily lead to anything, in my opinion. So, I mean, I said this earlier, I just like to queer every aspect of my life. So, I mean, being South Asian, being Muslim, my culture expects me to be cis, be straight, get married, have children, follow this very specific timeline, this very specific structure. And whilst I can counterpoint every single one of those, I'm also polyamorous, and I chose to get married because I wanted queer vows. I wanted to queer the idea of marriage. I wanted to marry my non-binary spouse and prove that marriage doesn't need to be what society tells us it needs to be. But that was my perspective on, queering and kind of being subversive about polyamory. But, everyone has different aspects of what they can change using their privilege. I mean, some people who hold my identity as queer Muslims or bi Muslims, I mean, this is a little bit counterpoint to what you said, Shiri, but their existence is kind of the antithesis of what is expected of them. And not everyone can kind of use their identity to the cat is going to jump, and not everyone can use their identity to be political and to be active, because obviously it comes down to safety and what's right for them. So I hope that people who do hold a privilege, like myself, will use their ability to be subversive, but also hold that privilege and utilize it in the best way possible. Because, you can be punk and be like, I'm just going to do this and, screw what they say. But what else are we saying beyond that? What else are we saying beyond monogamy is bad? Because monogamy isn't always bad for everyone, but how are we representing it? How are we deconstructing what was created for us by cis-het non-monogamous monosexual people?
Thank you, Hafsa. Yes, and it just needs, it needs many things, but there needs to be challenged many things. And just drawing from the comments, Maria Pallotta Chiaroli, hello, I love also your work. They say points for Christian and Shiri, but again, also to Hafsa, they talked. Polypatriarchy needs to be challenged as well. So this is also an important point, that we cannot leave the discussion about consensual non-monogamy is just to leave it there because it won't get better by itself without feminism, without queering, without all of these points that can help us in dismantle patriarchal hegemony. Okay, there's also a lot of good points, and we'll also taking the specificity of bi plus and distinguishing it also from aromantic and asexual people, put also there the bisexual people, and that and how they are different to those of gay and lesbians, because of the idea that you need to be attracted to not only, I would say also that you need to be attracted. Like we have the assumption that people need to have sexual attraction, they need to be have a sexual arousal, and need to be excited and to be a libido. And if you don't, then you're not normal. You are you have a disease, you have some kind of a condition. That's why when many of the pressures and oppression that the asexual and aromantic people face. And okay, then there's a lot of all of it, but and those are all great discussion on how we have to be subversive, like cats jumping on the laptop. And Ellen and Lucia, would you like to add something to this?
I actually wanted to clarify from before, because like obviously our obligation as individuals is first and foremost to ourselves. In response to what you said, Hafsa, that was well spoken. When I say like that just existing is not automatically political, I'm referring to like a very strong strain within bi activism that historically imagined bisexuality in and of itself, just living your life as a form of activism, which I just want to be wary of, because yes, living our lives definitely means we are making a difference within our lives and within our circles, the people around us, or even if we're in the closet, it doesn't matter, because just existing is a struggle in and of itself. Some people are not safe enough. And we absolutely, each and every one needs to keep themselves safe and make sure we're surviving and thriving. But still, I don't think that's enough. If the goal is to change reality, to oppose oppression in an active way, just existing is not going to do the job. And I just I want us to be wary of this pat on the back, okay, I'm existing, so I've done my share of the work, because there is a lot of work to be done, and if you're able to, then it's it's given to us.
Thank you, Shiri, for this. I think that it also resonates a lot with what Hafsa said before in her keynote. So the idea that, yes, as bi people, we have this privilege in a way of existing, and it's very political, but if you have the privilege also to do something with it, we should really do that. And I'm just reading through the comments, and somebody said, I'm kind of overwhelmed by how affirming, empowering, and intellectually stimulating this discussion is. And I borrowed this statement because, yeah, I think it's very affirming for all of us to stay here and be here. And yeah, I also think that, yes, as you all said, being something isn't of value as it is. It's what you put, what kind of work you put into it, being a bi person, being a non-monogamous person, being all of these different identities all together. It's what changes reality for us, our communities, and other people. And it's very powerful to be visible as well. I mean, in my very small perspective and small experiences, I've seen the power of being just an out bi person and what it means for other people around us. So, I mean, that's another part of the job, if we can. Of course, surviving is the key, the most important job that you can do, but then there are other steps to be taken.
Thank you, Lucia. Yeah, you all inspired me a lot right now, and I was also thinking about, so yesterday was Bi Visibility Day, and then we talk a lot about visibility, and I can say and see in many associations that at least in our national context now we have way more awareness, at least some discussion, which sometimes is just performative in a way. Okay, we've done the social post about Bi Visibility Day, then we're done for another year. See you again next September, dear bi-pass people and bisexual and pansexual. We've done our part. And sometimes really the silent part in many associations in which bisexuality is just there to the picture, said, oh yeah, but you're visible, we're going to give you visibility, which is something they say to artists to not pay them sometime. Oh, I'm going to pay you in visibility. But I guess it's come the time, and it's been actually a long time since, that we want way more than visibility, and this kind of discourses has to change, because just surviving is the first thing, and also helping others, then we have to make and be visible, do our multiple coming outs, and try to change even association from the inside. So we face different kind of oppression, both from LG groups in our history, and I think also in association which we are right now. So if you can give some suggestions on how to radicalize, to make your activism and your discourses not say just more stronger, but even more, let's say, powerful, or something that actually help you to bring these discourses? Like if we could say something to all the activists and researcher and performer out there, what could we say about?
I just wanted to draw a parallel as well between the discussions we're having now about bisexuality and monosexuality and gender. Like so many people have campaigned for and fought for the right to be non-binary and to have non-binary recognition, and now we've kind of that discussion has been taken and reinforced into expanding the binary to 3 instead of 2, and that's it. That's where the conversation ends for wider society. And I think, whilst there's great strides that have been made for non-binary recognition, obviously it should not just stop there. It should not just stop there for gender non-conforming people, genderqueer people, people beyond this binary that's been dictated. And I think when we look at that as bi people, we should look at that and say, we are not looking to reinforce a binary. We're not looking to expand a definition with another sentence, or again, like you said earlier, like giving organizations a chance to like pat themselves on the back for posting the bi flag one time. What are we doing to push that? What are we saying beyond that? Is the work that we're doing reinforcing a structure that already exists, or is it working to dismantle it? And I think that's something we should always keep in mind, because that's what we should be working towards, because the structure that we're in is not designed for us. It's not made for us, and it's going to work against us every single step of the way. Because like, for example, for people of color like myself, we are fighting against a very racist structure. When we achieve something, we're either told it's because we're exceptional and that's why we managed to do it, or because we were given a leg up, we were given extra support. Because that structure, again, was not made for people of color. It was not made for Black people. It's not made for people from the margins of society. So, I mean, someone's just helpfully put, don't put us into new boxes, break the boxes down. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think these boxes should be destroyed. So I think just centering your activism and thinking, what am I doing to destroy this, in a way, I guess, in a radical kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, that is why all our activism always has to be intersectional, because the structures we are facing are intersectionally oppressive. Like, the society that we currently live in was designed to maintain the power of rich white men, cishet men, of course, and able-bodied, and the whole list. So in everything we do, it's true. We need to be mindful of like the grand structure that controls really everything. And I think the only way to oppose that effectively is by subverting it completely, destroying it, and building something else that is beneficial for everyone, that allows everyone to survive and to thrive and to have to live.
Thank you, Shiri. Totally agree. And just reading the comments in which people are mind blown, and all of you.
Yeah,
amazing,
I need to disclaim, I can't read the comments right now because my brain can only handle like a single strain of text
no worries,
at a time.
We can read them to you.
Now I'm apologizing to all the commentators. I will check it out after.
No worries. Okay, so of course we need to check the power structure that we have. Please, Christian, go. Yes.
I don't know, while we are talking about, smashing and destroying, I was just, yeah, I very much agree. You need to, we need to destroy, the hegemonic categories of gender and sexuality, and also, certain structures and dynamics of inequality in society. But actually a word which has been on my mind listening to our conversation was also, let's say, the importance of, let's say, sustainability, which, and I think there's a certain conservative side to sustainability. So for example, when Shiri was saying earlier, no, we need to care for ourselves, I thought, yes, but we need to care in a way which, sustains ourselves, but also those around us. And I think it's, it's a common wisdom about, for example, bisexual community activism, that, people burn out very, very quickly. People in different locations kind of locate that, because we do not find ways to do things in a sustainable way. So I think, yeah, and in that kind of context, I think it kind of, I ask myself, what sustains me, doing sort of controversial things, politically in my workplace and so on. And I partially come back, to, let's say, everyday structures of solidarity and friendship. So my friend Robert Kulper recently organized an amazing, interesting workshop in Edinburgh on friendship and queer activism. I think, I think, as people with an interest in activism, I think we also need to nurture, structures of friendship and relationships of care and so on. And then we may have the power to smash other things.
Yeah, I think when we work on that, we work on all the other things as well. Like, for example, I think bisexual isolation really, really affects our activism and our politics. I know that it happened to me. I found myself quite a few years ago in a position where I was doing activism pretty much alone, or at least leading it alone. That was not sustainable. And I think a lot of us may be prone to that position because we are used to being rejected in spaces, and we're used to not having community to draw on and to like be assisted by. So yeah, I do think like one of the most important forms of bi activism is creating community and creating resources, whether they be emotional or material or political or whatever else, creating networks of mutual support that A, is activism in and of itself, and B, creates a better basis within which we can operate.
I'd also add throughout all this awesome conversation to set very healthy boundaries. I mean, obviously it's key. I really resonate with what you said about sustainability and just, the isolation that we've all been experiencing. The organization Consortium did some really interesting research on COVID and how that's affected LGBTQ+ people. It's not bi-specific, unfortunately, but it is quite interesting research. But I think setting healthy boundaries as bi people to say, yes, I will engage in this, but this is what I'm not going to discuss. This is what I'm going to talk about. And this is how I want to present myself. Like, for example, I'm sure we've all had the conversation of when did you learn that you were bi, and that kind of thing. And sometimes when we talk about being bi people, we're often told to kind of almost relive our trauma, to kind of explain, well, what led you to this, or tell us about this, or tell us about the depressing statistics. We know that bi people struggle with our mental health, with our physical health, with so much more. We know that. We have data to back that up. I keep shilling it, but Stonewall's bi report shows us that research. Many other researchers have brought this forward. We as bi people know this already. We shouldn't have to relive that trauma to get people to understand us, to get people to empathize with us, because we are people. That should be sufficient. We shouldn't have to say, and we have suffered, and therefore you should care about what we've gone through. So I think just setting healthy boundaries and calling in allies. So many people call themselves allies. It's time we hold them to account, because it's not enough to say I am an ally for XYZ community. If someone says they are, we need them to do things. We need them to be active and step in and support us actively in what we're doing. If you're struggling to get stuff done and you're doing it on your own, stop. I mean, I would advise stop doing this on your own and call in all those self-declared allies to do the work for you, because they should be doing it anyway. And hopefully that support can bolster you to do what you want to do, and find your space where you're not exhausting yourself. You're sharing what you're comfortable with without, setting unhealthy boundaries. And you're also taking time for yourself. Like, the whole self-care thing isn't just about taking a bath now and then. Maybe it's a lot more than that. Maybe it's saying no a lot of the time, where someone's like, tell us about your life. And you're like, no, I don't really want to. That's not relevant to this conversation. Or myself, I don't talk about certain aspects of my life because it's not relevant to the conversation. I generally don't talk about my past because it is not relevant. As I speak to you now, I am a person of privilege. Talking about where I came from and my lack of privilege then is not relevant to where I am now, because I have so much privilege in this space as a very open, very vocal, very out queer Muslim, which is not the norm. I think let's focus on where we are now than where we've come from, if that makes sense. Because I see so many other activists who are like, yes, I struggled 10 years ago. And I'm like, okay, but what are you doing now? You have privilege now. How are you using that? Why are you relying on what you did 10 years ago and how hard it was, X, Y, Z? I'm not saying it's not relevant, but I'm saying, you know, what is it? How is it telling you what to do now? How is it, you've got this privilege now, so how are you using it? I'm talking in circles a bit, but hope that makes sense.
No, but I agree. It's like the best thing to do with privilege is to take it and use it to uplift others. But also I wanted to say about like this requirement that we tell our stories, the way that various groups' struggles are only legitimized if we provide like a story of misery, a story of suffering, that like recognition of us as a group hinges on us performing a sad story. And I think there's something just really cool about that. There's something very dehumanizing about it, like having to perform your suffering to get legitimacy. So yeah, it's exactly like what you said. Like society requires us to do that, and we absolutely have the power to refuse and like to talk about the things that we actually need rather than go back into our pain and trauma.
Thank you, Shiri. Christian, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wanting to take up the theme of this, and I found that, I mean, there's one particular kind of struggle, you know, on gender and sexuality issues, which strikes me as being utterly important, certainly in the UK, but also in other societies, which is struggles for trans recognition or transgender liberation, because of that kind of massive and effective mobilization of, you know, trans exclusive and transphobic conservative forces within and without feminism, and within, you know, religious communities and elsewhere. And of course, you know, some in this panel may readily agree because they are sort of, you know, part of these transgender struggles already. But I think as a sort of, let's say, more concerning bisexual activism or bisexual communities, which is in itself, let's say, communities which are, you know, diverse in their kind of gender identifications and makeups. I think this needs to be, I think we need to see that as an important struggle. I was just kind of, you know, for example, thinking about, you know, the LGBT Alliance as one of the, you know, radical, gender critical and trans exclusive, you know, political forces, which is, you know, doing a lot of damage to transgender people's lives. Why is it called LGBT Alliance? I think, you know, there's a call upon bisexual people to be part of that alliance. And, you know, and what I've just been reading a bit about it, and it says, like, you know, basically for bisexual people to understand that it is their sexual orientation, that they are oriented towards two sexes and we should not interrogate sex. So, you know, I think it is kind of, it is important, I think, for bisexual politics to be very in particular about the category of sex and how it is used in politics, but also to be critical about of sexual orientation and how it is used in politics, which are very often exclusive, and in this particular kind of struggle, you know, are used against transgender people's rights.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because that's really important, and we don't want to be part of their oppression towards transgender and non-binary people. Bi+ people always have, of course, a lot of issues. In Shiri's book, there's a huge part on transphobia within bisexual communities and biphobia in transgender communities. Still, we have, of course, the interconnection and what you call the alliances and all the important thing. I don't think really we don't have to avoid that fight as feminist people, as queer and activists, whatever identity you might have on that, that's really important and it's fundamental. And it's also about us, because it's those who defy the binaries that are being targeted. It's not by just, you know, being allied with the oppressor that we're going to delay our oppression. There's been so many important inputs, and I'm really sorry to say we just have 7 minutes to close everything. And so thank you for also talking about self-care, boundaries, the thing that sometimes we have to lit the fires and ask for help. Please don't do things alone. There are communities probably around here or online that you can be a part, and that's actually something that helped, I think, all of us to avoid burnout and to take care, because if we burn, then we cannot do our activism anymore. So it's not really worth it. Okay, so if there's a lot of comments that inspiring people are really happy. But is there any one question? We can have the last 5 minutes, or if anybody wants to do one final remark, please feel free.
I actually wanted to comment on one Christian said. I mean, first of all, I need to say LGBT Alliance is a biphobic organization, and it's mostly run by cishet people. So I absolutely think we need to work on transphobia within bisexual communities. But fortunately, I'm happy to say LGBT Alliance is not our problem. I mean, at least, except for the fact that they're, you know, instrumentalizing the name of our group to give themselves authority. Also, I wanted to say that what's going on right now with transphobic backlash is so scary and dystopian, and also a really good example of how visibility is not enough in concern to by Visibility Day, which was yesterday. Visibility in and of itself, visibility without liberation just makes you a target. And that is something we absolutely need to carry with us. The fact that being visible always has to come in the context of liberation.
That's a great quote. Please, can I can we use that? Because visibility without liberation, it just make us target, and it's true.
That credit goes to Maz Hedgehog on Twitter. They said that, and it was absolutely accurate.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shiri. If Christian or Hafsa, you want to say something?
I think a lot of this discussion could just be excerpts from Shiri's book, because yeah, it's like I'm still fangirling, but I'll stop. I think I just kind of wanted to echo what everyone has said, and I think also just to say, like, when you're doing this work, who are you speaking to? So I sometimes end up in a corporate environment where I'm talking to people who do not necessarily care as much as we do, but at the same time, if I'm doing visibility work, yes, buy Shiri's book, obviously. Everyone should. I have 2 copies. So basically, when we're talking to someone, who are we speaking to? So when I do visibility work, am I doing it for a bunch of people who just want to see a weird looking bi person, as in weird as in they're not expecting to see a Muslim bi person? Or am I speaking to other people like me? And when I try and do the work that I do for visibility anyway, I'm not talking to the people that don't think I exist. I'm talking to the people who are just like me, who deserve to see themselves represented. And I think if you're doing things like panels and everything like that, this is going to sound really weird, but don't hire people like me who are quite visible. hire the people within your community who are doing the work on the ground, because yes, there are people like me who can talk about being bi till the end of time, but there are people who are doing this constantly who aren't getting the recognition that they absolutely should. I think someone mentioned earlier, like, you know, people have talked about their experiences from like 10 years ago, and like there are people who are actively working in their communities, you know, working to change the law, working to change internal policies, all that kind of thing. That's just, I guess, not as sexy, quote unquote, as, you know, like people sitting here and talking like about trauma and everything. You know, reach out to those people. If you see someone or you know someone who is working, doing that kind of work, platform them. Don't platform someone like me who says too much on Twitter. Like, I think just see if you can use your privilege to bring in those people who have so much to say and who are never platformed, and who also absolutely should be paid for their work. Don't just bring them in for free. I think that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Hafsa. Yes, we can fanboyish and fangirling and together, absolutely. Actually, for all of you, my part. And thanks you all for being here. Thanks you for all the amazing inspiration, quotes, discussion, reflection on bisexuality, bi-plus identities, and all of our liberation, and not just about our orientation, but for everyone, unless it won't be for all of us. And I'm really proud to have been here, and thank you all. So see you to all the people following us, and see you in the panels. We're going to start the next session in a few minutes, just time to round up things. And to our guests and panelists, please come again. And it's been great having you here. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.